China's military is growing as the communist regime tries to expand its power around the world. But a new alliance may challenge China's rise. Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. More and more, the U.S. is viewing China as a global threat, especially when it comes to increased military aggression and massive investment overseas that gets other countries in debt to China. And that's why the U.S. may seek to form an Asian version of NATO to counter it. This group could include India, Australia, and Japan, and also the U.S., which is technically not in Asia. So it's like an Asian-American NATO. Wait, Australia also isn't in Asia, so it's an Asian-Australian-American NATO, AAA NATO. You know what, we'll figure out the name later. The original NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, is an international alliance of 29 member states from North America and Europe. It was set up in the wake of World War II.
The reason NATO was created in 1945, as it's been famously put, is to keep the Russians out, the Germans down, and the Americans in. And the reason is that really what the American presence has done is provided a security guarantee. And that means that other European nations don't have to build up their arms, that they don't have to acquire things like nuclear weapons in order to feel secure. So this is the importance of NATO.
Of course, that's the ideal scenario. The U.S. President Donald Trump has criticized NATO for a variety of reasons. One reason is unfair defense spending. While NATO guidelines suggest defense spending at 2% of GDP, most nations spend a lot less than that. The lion's share is picked up by the U.S. So President Trump is not the biggest fan of NATO. Though at a NATO summit in July, he ultimately reaffirmed the NATO alliance.
President Trump ultimately did back an agreement that reaffirmed the strength of the NATO alliance, and he praised the U.S. relationship with Germany.
I mean, relations have to thaw at some point. And now, there are signs that an alliance similar to NATO may be coming to Asia. Here's Trump at the ASEAN summit in late 2017.
I'm here to advance peace, to promote security, and to work with you to achieve a truly free and open Indo-Pacific.
Not Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific. And that's not the only time President Trump has used it.
The Indo-Pacific. The Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific region.
And it's not just being used by Trump. The term was used by Secretaries of State Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, high-ranking U.S. generals, Japanese leader Shinzo Abe, and it's the official term used by the Australian government. That's just to name a few. Indo-Pacific refers to the region encompassed by the Indian and Pacific Oceans. It's also a way to emphasize India's role in the region. And the United States may be trying to bring together Asian democracies into an alliance, with the goal of keeping the very undemocratic China in check. To be clear, no official alliance has been announced. That being said, as far back as 2007, current Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe started an informal strategic dialogue between the U.S., Japan, Australia, and India. It was called the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, which at the time I assumed was a group designed to protect the rights of all parallelograms. That's a math joke. See? High school geometry was not a waste of time. So anyway, there's no official alliance yet between the US, Japan, Australia, and India. But this briefing on the Indo-Pacific strategy from 2018 gave some clarity on the Trump administration's outlook for the region. Highlights from the briefing include making sure Indo-Pacific nations are free from coercion. You know, just in general, not by any country in particular. Protecting global air and sea trade, especially in the South China Sea. Again, not from any country in particular. And getting India to play a bigger role in the region. Wow, I never thought I'd see a government report with so many subtweets. But how do you make a free and open Indo-Pacific happen? Well, first you create a government acronym for it. In this case, FOIP, or FOIP? Whatever. Then, after you create an acronym, you counter Chinese economic and military aggression with your own. But before we get to that, a quick commercial break, if YouTube hasn't demonetized us, that is. So, how does one foster a free and open Indo-Pacific? On the economic front, in September 2018, the Trump administration announced plans to work with Japan in the region to build energy sectors, push investment in physical and digital infrastructure, and prep for natural disasters. The plans support Bangladesh and many of the island nations in the Pacific, so this is clearly aimed at countering China's own investment strategy in the region, the Belt and Road Initiative, also known as One Belt, One Road. That's where China invests big bucks in a country in order to get them in a debt trap to further their, quote, imperialist ambitions. The US, Japan, Australia, and India may also be looking at other ways to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. They're going to call it the Suspenders and Monorail Initiative, and I hear they put a great guy in charge. Okay, so while there won't be any actual monorails, Japan has pledged to fund 80% of the cost of a new high-speed rail in India. But the military will also play a big role in this new strategy. I mean, you can't have a free and open Indo-Pacific unless you can stop the Chinese regime from seizing control of shipping lanes and forcing other ships off course. So in addition to all the economic promises the US and Japan made, they also promised to back that up with maritime security. But again, I don't want to give the impression this is something new or something only the Trump administration thought of. The need for an Asian equivalent of NATO has been around for a long time. The US and India have been conducting military drills called the Malabar exercises since 1992. In 2015, under the Obama administration, Japan joined. Australia had planned to join in 2018, but India blocked it, fearing it would antagonize China. Now, the United States, India, Japan, and Australia do have military exercises together. They just don't all do them together at once. And let's not forget former President Obama's pivot to Asia. For US-China policy, the pivot was a jump to the left, then a step to the right. Then you put your hands on your hips and wait, that's the time warp. Anyway, under Obama's pivot to Asia, the US lifted a long-standing arms embargo to Vietnam. Vietnam at the time had begun to challenge the Chinese regime over territorial claims in the South China Sea. And last year, President Trump sent a US warship to make a port of call in Vietnam. It was the first time in decades. The last time was under different circumstances. The port of call was shocking because it means China is aggravating its neighbors so much that communist Vietnam is moving closer to the US. And even more shocking, it shows Trump is expanding one of Obama's policies. India is also getting in on the action, selling surface-to-air missiles to Vietnam. Japan has also been developing closer military relations with Vietnam over the past few years. In fact, Japan's military has become more active in the South China Sea in general. This is from 2017.
Japan's largest warship is set to sail through the contested waters of the South China Sea in the nation's largest show of naval force since the Second World War.
Which is pretty impressive since Japan technically doesn't have a military. It's only supposed to have a self-defense force, according to a pacifist constitution the US forced onto the country after World War II. But in 2015, self-defense was stretched to also include fighting overseas. Since Shinzo Abe became prime minister in 2012, there's been a steady increase in Japan's defense spending. And just last year, Japan formed its first Marine Corps since the end of World War II. And they've already started training with the US to storm beaches. Japan is also getting its first aircraft carrier since World War II. Seeing a trend? But while on the surface, a stronger Japanese military makes sense for a free and open Indo-Pacific, it could be a deal-breaker for other Indo-Pacific countries to sign up for any kind of alliance against China. Notice, I didn't mention South Korea. Imperial Japan committed a lot of atrocities in the region during World War II. Like, a lot. There's a reason why even white supremacists were like, you know what, these guys are cool. That's why, following the war, Japan wasn't allowed to even have a military. And there's still a lot of sour feelings. In 2017, the US, Japan, and South Korea conducted military drills when North Korea was acting especially missile crazy. But last year, Japan withdrew from drills meant to send a message to China because of old World War II grudges. Yeah, the Japanese did so many terrible things in the early 20th century, that some South Koreans are more freaked out about Imperial Japan than the current threat of the Chinese Communist Party. Then again, even though Japan occupied the Philippines during World War II, that didn't stop joint military drills there last October. Because at the end of the day, the growing concern in the region is China. The Indo-Pacific region will eventually be dominated by an aggressive, authoritarian Chinese regime unless other countries can both make China's military think twice and provide an investment alternative to the Belt and Road. Is an Asian, Australian, American equivalent of NATO the answer? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And before you go, America Uncovered covers controversial topics YouTube doesn't like. Our videos get demonetized a lot. That's why we use the crowdfunding website Patreon. And we rely on your support to keep this show going and growing. On China Uncensored, we answer questions from fans who support us on Patreon, and we're looking at doing the same for America Uncovered. So, head over to patreon.com/AmericaUncovered, sign up to contribute $1 or more per episode, and then you can leave me your questions. If we get enough, I'll answer some at the end of new episodes. And as always, thanks for watching. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. This is America Uncovered.